Worry arrives like an unexpected guest and refuses to leave without explanation. It whispers improbable futures, sketches dark outlines, and steals the calm of ordinary moments. The voice feels intimate and persuasive, convincing you that thinking will somehow fix unknown outcomes. This video begins with urgency because worry is both a signal and a threat. By the end, you will understand how worry functions, when it serves you, and how philosophy has offered practical answers for centuries. At its simplest, worry is purposive cognitive activity oriented toward the future. The mind rehearses scenarios, estimates risks, and attempts to anticipate what might go wrong in coming moments. This anticipatory thinking has an obvious functional purpose grounded in survival and preparation. Worry evolved as a mental early warning system that motivates protective behavior. When calibrated properly, it nudges attention toward threats and prompts adaptive planning that can prevent harm. Evolutionary thinkers remind us that animals and humans developed foresight to survive unpredictable environments. Early humans who anticipated droughts, predators, and shortages had better odds of surviving and reproducing. That selective pressure-shaped neural circuits that now produce the phenomenon we call worry. Worry sits at the intersection between cognition and emotion, wired into memory systems, threat detection, and social reasoning. What once improved survival sometimes over-revs in modern contexts, where threats are symbolic and chronic rather than immediate and physical. Experientially, worry feels like repetitive mental loops that refuse resolution. Thoughts circle like a mental carousel, focusing on what might go wrong rather than what could be done. That repetition amplifies emotional intensity, creating a feedback loop between cognition and bodily arousal. The phenomenology of worry includes imagined futures, bodily tension, and narrowed attention toward threat. Understanding this subjective texture helps illuminate why some worries lead to action while others produce paralysis and dread. Concern and worry are cousins that look similar but behave very differently. Concern is focused, specific, and action-oriented with a clear object and possible remedies. Worry, in contrast, often stays general, speculative, and untethered from immediate actionable steps. Concern leads towards solving problems and reallocating attention where it helps the most. Worry tends to scatter mental resources into hypothetical catastrophes that rarely improve outcomes or guide decisions effectively. There are moments when worry serves you by increasing vigilance and motivating preparation. Preparing for a job interview, an important exam, or a medical appointment often benefits from controlled concern. In those contexts, anticipatory thoughts generate rehearsal, resource gathering, and contingency planning that improve likelihood of success. Worry becomes useful when it narrows attention enough to prompt concrete behaviors that address the perceived risk. The key feature is that worry translates into planning, checks, and adaptive steps that reduce uncertainty materially. Harmful worry looks different because it amplifies uncertainty without steering behavior toward resolution. It can immobilize decision-making, erode sleep, and reduce concentration on what is actually controllable. Over time, this pattern fatigues cognitive resources and undermines both mood and performance. Chronic worry frequently blinds people to realistic probabilities and pushes them toward avoidance or excessive reassurance seeking. Recognizing the transition from useful concern to destructive worry is essential for regaining agency over one's mental life. Psychology gives us names for the mechanisms that keep worry spinning out of control. Catastrophizing inflates the probability and severity of negative events beyond reasonable bounds. Avoidance strengthens worry because it prevents corrective evidence and keeps imagined threats untested by reality. Safety behaviors temporarily reduce anxiety, but also reinforce the belief that danger is inevitable. Understanding these dynamics enables targeted interventions that break the cycle of escalating worry and bring attention back to what actually matters. The Stoics confronted fear and the future by teaching a radical distinction between what we control and what we do not. Their advice gives practical rules about allocating mental energy toward actions that truly matter. Stoicism does not deny worry, but reframes it as a question about competency and responsibility. When you adopt Stoic framings, you investigate whether your worry concerns judgments, choices, or external events beyond influence. This refocus allows you to transform anxious rumination into disciplined preparation for things within your skill to change. Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius wrote about rehearsing difficulties as a spiritual practice to inoculate the mind. They recommended imagining loss, difficulty, and hardship to lessen their emotional impact when they arrived. This form of premeditatio malorum reframes worry as disciplined rehearsal rather than chaotic fear. Practiced correctly, Stoic exercises convert diffuse worry into a precise mental rehearsal that informs adaptive planning. The machinery of worry becomes a tool when you intentionally conduct thought experiments with clear outcomes and responses. Modern philosophers added layers to this ancient insight by asking what worrying reveals about values and identity. Existentialists, for instance, saw worry as a symptom of freedom and responsibility rather than mere pathology. The anxiety of choice forces humans to confront the weight of making meaning under uncertainty. Philosophy thus reframes worry not only as a cognitive failure, but as an existential signal that points to unexamined priorities. Listening to that signal can uncover what you truly care about and where action might align with deeper values. Economics and decision theory help explain why worry sometimes promotes prudent behavior in a world of risk. Concepts like expected value and precautionary saving show that anticipating bad outcomes can improve aggregate welfare. Individuals who hedge against plausible losses preserve opportunities and reduce volatility in their lives. At the same time, overweighing low-probability disasters can lead to suboptimal choices that squander present opportunities. The economic lens reminds us that good worrying is calibrated to realistic probabilities and cost-benefit trade-offs. If worry is energy, then the crucial question becomes how to direct that energy toward productive ends. The first step is explicit differentiation between solvable problems and uncertain outcomes that require acceptance. That assessment creates clarity about whether to plan, to act, or to let go. Often people skip this diagnostic step and wander into rumination without any plan. A disciplined approach to worry begins with mapping the problem space and listing feasible next steps that reduce uncertainty tangibly. One practical exercise is scheduling a brief, focused worry period each day instead of letting thoughts intrude continuously. Time-boxing worry confines anxious thinking to a controlled slot, where you intentionally examine fears and possible responses. That ritual prevents worry from spreading into every waking minute and preserves cognitive bandwidth. Another exercise is listing actions for each worry and choosing the smallest immediate step toward resolution. Breaking problems into tiny, concrete tasks converts abstract dread into measurable progress and restores a sense of efficacy. Cognitive techniques offer tools to challenge distorted worry thoughts and reframe them toward realistic appraisals. Techniques like cognitive restructuring help identify automatic catastrophic assumptions and weigh them against evidence. Reappraisal shifts the narrative from helplessness to perspective, enabling more balanced predictions about future outcomes. Practicing these skills gradually reduces the intensity and frequency of catastrophic imaginations. The mind learns to substitute worst-case fantasies with probable scenarios that are easier to address practically. Behavioral approaches complement cognitive strategies by emphasizing action rather than argument. Implementation intentions simple, if then plans bridge intention and behavior in high-worry situations. By deciding in advance what you will do, you reduce decision fatigue and inhibit the freeze response that often accompanies anxiety. Tiny behavioral experiments test feared outcomes in manageable ways and deliver corrective feedback. Each small success weakens the power of fearful scenarios and builds evidence that the world is less catastrophic than imagined. Mindfulness and acceptance-based methods teach a different relationship to worry by shifting how you hold thoughts. Instead of fighting or fixing every anxious thought, you notice its presence and allow it to pass through awareness. This stance reduces reactivity and prevents thoughts from commanding behavior unconsciously. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means redirecting energy toward valuable action despite discomfort. With practice, you can carry worry while still acting in line with long-term values and responsibilities. Worry is not only an individual matter, it has social and ethical dimensions that philosophy helps illuminate. Our concerns often reflect responsibilities to others, communities, and future generations. Recognizing this social embeddedness turns private worry into public questions about duty, care, and collective action. When worry is about shared risks, the appropriate response often involves communication, collaboration, and collective planning. Philosophy invites us to ask what kinds of social structures reduce needless worry while distributing responsibility fairly. There are clear signs that worry has crossed into clinical territory where professional help becomes necessary. Persistent, debilitating worry that interferes with functioning, sleep, and relationships requires assessment and treatment. Therapies like CBT, medication, and integrated care provide evidence-based relief that restores capacity for purposeful action. Knowing when to seek help is an act of practical wisdom, not weakness or failure. Philosophy supports this judgment by valuing flourishing and acknowledging the limits of purely individual strategies in the face of biological vulnerability. When considered together, philosophy and psychology offer a powerful framework for converting worry into agency. Philosophy asks meaningful questions about control, value, and responsibility, while psychology supplies tools to alter cognitive and behavioral patterns. The synergy of both disciplines helps you decide when to plan, when to act, and when to accept. The transformation begins with honest appraisal, disciplined practice, and modest experiments that test fearful beliefs against reality. Over time, worry can lose its tyrannical hold and become a calibrated instrument for prudent decision-making. Philosophy's deepest guidance about concern is subtle and paradoxical, encouraging both courage and humility. It asks you to pursue what is within your control boldly while relinquishing what is not with equanimity and dignity. This double movement preserves energy for worthwhile efforts and frees you from needless rumination. The final lesson reframes worry as a kind of moral prompt that indicates where values demand attention. Responding wisely means choosing actions coherent with your deepest commitments instead of surrendering to fear without a plan. Practically, start by mapping your worries and assigning them to 3 categories: solvable problems, probable outcomes, and uncontrollable uncertainties. For solvable problems, write tiny actionable next steps and do one of them immediately. For probable outcomes, create contingency plans proportional to realistic risk. And for uncontrollable uncertainties, practice acceptance rituals such as journaling or brief meditations. These heuristics simplify decision-making and preserve emotional energy for meaningful action. Over time, this habit reduces the fog of constant worry and increases a sense of competence and calm. Remember that transformation takes repetition and small successes rather than dramatic insight alone. Each experiment, however modest, provides corrective evidence that weakens catastrophic beliefs. Over weeks and months, these accumulated experiences reshape expectation, reduce anticipatory anxiety, and promote confidence in dealing with uncertainty. Patience and curiosity are essential companions on this path of change. Treat your mind like a tool that can be tuned, maintained, and directed toward values that matter most to you. Philosophy offers a final twist. Worry can be evidence of moral seriousness rather than a sign of failure. If you care about things that matter, your mind will naturally protest against potential loss and injustice. The task is not to eradicate all worry, but to shape it into responsible and effective concern. This reorientation honors both the emotional signal and the practical requirement to act. When worry becomes a compass rather than a chain, you participate more fully in your life and the lives of others. As we close, consider the paradox that worrying thoughtfully makes you both more humane and more decisive. Thoughtfully engaged worry points to commitments worth defending and problems worth solving, rather than to phantoms to be feared. Philosophy invites you to translate anxious energy into deliberate action aligned with your values. If this gave you a new perspective on worry, hit subscribe for more ideas about thinking clearly and living courageously. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe.